A lonely millionaire recognizes a 7-year-old beggar and decides to follow her. After a while, she enters a warehouse filled with boxes of gold bars. What the millionaire does next is truly shocking. Alexander Sterling stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, his reflection ghosting against the Manhattan skyline. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the Persian carpet, highlighting the emptiness of the vast space around him. Despite the luxurious furnishings and priceless art adorning the walls, the room felt as hollow as its owner's heart. His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom, announcing the board meeting's imminent start. Alexander straightened his Italian silk tie, a gesture performed with mechanical precision. At 52, he cut an impressive figure, salt and pepper, hair perfectly coiffed, his tailored suit hiding the athletic build he maintained through rigorous daily workouts. Yet his steel-gray eyes held a coldness that made even seasoned executives flinch. The boardroom fell silent as he entered. 20 pairs of eyes followed his movement to the head of the table, where he took his seat without acknowledgement. The quarterly numbers flashed across the screen, profits up 40%, 3 new acquisitions completed, stock prices at an all-time high, success measured in cold, hard figures. "The Thompson deal closes tomorrow," his CFO announced, pride evident in his voice. "Another billion added to our portfolio." Alexander merely nodded, his mind already drifting to the next conquest. Money had become his only companion, his sole measure of worth. The empire he'd built served as both fortress and prison, keeping the world at bay while trapping him within walls of his own making. As the meeting droned on, his gaze wandered to the small silver frame on his desk, the only personal item in the entire office. The photo inside showed a laughing little girl with his eyes and her mother's smile, frozen in time at age 8. Emily. The name he hadn't spoken aloud in nearly a decade still had the power to constrict his chest. The board members filed out, leaving him alone with the gathering dusk. He should have felt triumphant, another successful day of empire building. Instead, the victory tasted like ashes in his mouth. The same emptiness that had haunted him since that terrible day when Emily vanished threatened to overwhelm him. His phone buzzed with messages from various business associates, all demanding immediate attention. Alexander ignored them, gathering his belongings with deliberate slowness. The thought of returning to his empty penthouse apartment held no appeal, but neither did staying in the office. These days, no place felt like home. The private elevator carried him to the underground parking garage where his Bentley waited. As he stepped out, something unusual caught his eye. A flash of movement in the shadows, too quick to properly register. Alexander paused, his security training kicking in. But the garage appeared empty, save for the gleaming luxury vehicles of his executive team. He was about to dismiss it as imagination when he heard it, the soft scuff of shoes against concrete. Alexander turned slowly, his hand hovering over the panic button on his key fob. What he saw made him freeze in place. A little girl stood between 2 concrete pillars, watching him with unnervingly steady eyes. She couldn't have been more than 7 or 8, her small frame swimming in clothes several sizes too big. Dark curls escaped from a messy ponytail, framing a face that seemed both young and somehow ancient. "You shouldn't be here," Alexander said, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "This is private property." The girl didn't respond. Instead, she took a step backward, her eyes never leaving his face. Something about her gaze tugged at his memory, stirring emotions he'd worked hard to bury. Before he could stop himself, he took a step toward her. She retreated further, moving with purpose rather than fear. Alexander found himself following, drawn by an inexplicable compulsion. The girl led him past rows of luxury cars, deeper into the shadows of the garage. Every instinct told him to stop, to call security, to return to his ordered world of spreadsheets and acquisitions. But for the first time in years, Alexander Sterling ignored logic and followed his gut. The girl paused at the emergency exit, pushing it open with surprising strength. Cool evening air rushed in, carrying the sounds and smells of the city. She glanced back at him once more, her expression unreadable, then slipped through the door. Alexander hesitated for just a moment, his hand resting on the cool metal handle. On the other side of this door lay uncertainty, possible danger, and the disruption of his carefully constructed routine. Yet the thought of returning to his empty life suddenly seemed unbearable. With a deep breath, he pushed open the door and stepped into the gathering darkness, following the mysterious child who had awakened something long dormant within him: curiosity and perhaps hope. The city streets had transformed in the deepening twilight, familiar landmarks taking on mysterious new shapes in the gathering darkness. Alexander followed the girl through a maze of side streets and narrow alleys, moving steadily away from the gleaming towers of the financial district. His shoes, Italian leather that cost more than most people's monthly rent, clicked against the cracked pavement. The girl moved with surprising confidence, navigating the urban landscape as if she'd memorized every turn. She glanced back occasionally, those unsettling eyes checking to ensure he still followed. Alexander had long since lost track of their exact location, but something stronger than curiosity kept him moving forward. They emerged onto a street lined with abandoned warehouses, their windows dark and empty. Vegetation pushed through cracks. In the concrete, nature slowly reclaiming what humans had left behind. The girl paused before a massive structure, its red brick walls covered in climbing vines. A rusted chain hung uselessly from the front door, the lock long since broken. "Wait!" Alexander called out, his voice sounding strange in the empty street. But the girl had already slipped inside, leaving him with a choice: turn back to his safe, predictable world, or step into the unknown. He chose the unknown. The interior of the warehouse was surprisingly vast, moonlight filtering through, broken windows high above. The girl's footsteps echoed off the concrete floor as she led him deeper into the space. The air smelled of dust and decay, with an underlying metallic tang that reminded Alexander of old coins. In the center of the warehouse floor, a collection of metal crates sat arranged in a rough circle. They looked out of place among the debris, newer though covered in rust, with heavy-duty locks securing their contents. The girl stopped beside one of the crates and turned to face him, her expression expectant. "What is this place?" Alexander asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why did you bring me here?" Instead of answering, the girl began struggling with one of the crates, trying to shift its considerable weight. Without thinking, Alexander moved to help her. Together, they managed to slide the crate a few feet across the floor, revealing a hidden panel beneath. The girl knelt and pressed something Alexander couldn't see. A soft click echoed through the warehouse, and the panel swung open. Alexander's breath caught in his throat. Gold. Bars of pure gold gleamed in the dim light, their surfaces unmarked by time or tarnish. But it wasn't just gold. Beneath the precious metal, Alexander glimpsed stacks of documents, their edges crisp and white against the darkness. "This isn't yours," the girl spoke for the first time, her voice surprisingly clear and steady. "It belongs to people who will do anything to keep their secrets hidden." Alexander reached for one of the documents, but the girl's small hand shot out, stopping him. "They're watching," she whispered. "They're always watching. But I know things they don't want found. Things about missing people, about families torn apart." The words hit Alexander like a physical blow. Missing people. Families torn apart. The weight of his own loss pressed against his chest, making it hard to breathe. "Who are you?" he asked, studying her face more carefully. There was something familiar about her features, something that tugged at memories he'd tried to bury. "Someone who needs help," she answered, "and someone who can help you too. But we have to be careful. They have eyes everywhere. And they won't. Stop until they've silenced everyone who knows the truth." A distant sound, metal against metal, echoed through the warehouse. The girl's head snapped up, fear flashing across her face. "They're coming," she whispered. "We have to go." Now, Alexander's business instinct screamed at him to walk away. This was dangerous, complicated, and completely outside his carefully controlled world. But as he looked at the girl's face, illuminated by the moonlight streaming through the broken windows, he saw something that made decision impossible to ignore: hope. "What do you need me to do?" he asked, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. The girl reached into her oversized jacket and pulled out a small notebook, its pages dog-eared and worn. "Keep this safe," she said, pressing it into his hands. "It has names, dates, locations, everything they don't want anyone to know, including what happened to your daughter." The mention of Emily sent a shock through Alexander's system. "What do you know about my daughter?" he demanded. But the sound of footsteps was growing closer. The girl grabbed his hand, pulling him toward a hidden door half concealed behind a stack of empty pallets. "Trust me," she pleaded. "Just this once. Trust someone besides yourself." Alexander hesitated for just a moment before following her through the door. As they emerged into a narrow alley behind the warehouse, the cool night air carried the sounds of the city, distant sirens, the rumble of traffic, the hum of millions of lives intersecting in the darkness. He had no way of knowing it then, but that moment would mark the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything he thought he knew about wealth, power, and the true meaning of value. The notebook in his pocket felt impossibly heavy, weighted, with secrets that would soon turn his world upside down. The city lights blurred past as Alexander's Bentley wove through the late-night traffic. His hands gripped the steering wheel with unnecessary force, knuckles white against the leather. In the passenger seat, the mysterious girl sat quietly, her small frame dwarfed by the luxury vehicle's interior. The notebook she'd given him pressed against his chest from inside his jacket pocket, its secrets burning like a hot coal. "You still haven't told me your name," Alexander said, breaking the tense silence. His voice sounded strained, even to his own ears. The girl turned from the window, her dark eyes reflecting the passing streetlights. "Sarah," she answered after a long pause, "but that's not my real name. They gave it to me when they took me." Alexander's grip on the steering wheel tightened further. "Who are they? And what do they have to do with my daughter?" Sarah's expression darkened. "The Goldstein family. They look respectable on the outside. Charity galas, business awards, newspaper headlines about their philanthropy. But it's all a facade. They use people like me to hide their secrets, to move their wealth around without anyone noticing." The name sent a chill down Alexander's spine. Regina Goldstein was a fixture in New York's social circles, known for her sharp business acumen and charitable works. He'd crossed paths with her at various events over the years, always noting the calculating look behind her pleasant smile. "We need somewhere safe," Sarah continued, her small hands fidgeting with the hem of her oversized jacket. "They'll check all the obvious places first: your home, your office, any property in your name." Alexander nodded, already running through options in his mind. His years in business had taught him the value of contingency plans. "I have a place," he said finally. "Off the books. Not even my assistant knows about it." They drove in silence for another 20 minutes, heading away from Manhattan's glittering skyline toward the quieter streets of Queens. Alexander parked the Bentley in a public garage, too obvious a target to keep, and led Sarah on foot through a maze of residential streets. The safe house was a modest brownstone, deliberately unremarkable among its neighbors. Alexander had purchased it through a shell company years ago, intending it as a potential bolt hole if any of his more aggressive business takeovers went south. Now, as he ushered Sarah inside, he was grateful for his paranoia. The interior was sparsely furnished but comfortable. Sarah moved through the space with careful attention, checking windows and shadows with the wariness of someone far older than her years. Alexander watched her, noting how she positioned herself to keep both, him and the exits, in view. "The notebook," she said finally, settling onto the edge of a leather armchair. "You should read it now." Alexander pulled the worn notebook from his jacket. Its pages were filled with neat, precise handwriting, dates, names, locations, all carefully documented. As he read, his blood ran cold. The Goldstein family's legitimate business empire was just the tip of the iceberg. Beneath the surface lay a web of corruption that stretched back decades. "For these numbers," he muttered, pointing to a series of entries. "They're routing codes for international banks. They've been moving billions through shadow accounts." Sarah nodded. "The gold you saw. It's how they keep their real business off. The books. But the documents underneath, those are the real treasure. Evidence of everything they've done, everyone they've hurt. Including what happened to Emily." Alexander's head snapped up at his daughter's name. "What do you know about Emily? Tell me." I know she disappeared on October 12th, 8 years ago, Sarah said quietly. I know she was walking home from ballet class when a black SUV pulled up beside her. I know because I was there in another car watching. It was one of my first assignments. They used me to make it look less suspicious, just two children walking home from dance class. The Walsey seemed to tilt on its axis. Alexander grabbed the edge of the desk, steadying himself. You saw what happened to her? Sarah's eyes filled with tears. I did more than see. I helped them take her. I didn't have a choice. They had leverage over me, over all the children they used. But Emily was different. She was kind to me even though I was helping them. She gave me her bracelet, told me to keep it safe. With trembling hands, Sarah reached into her pocket and withdrew a delicate silver chain. A small ballet slipper charm dangled from it, catching the light. Alexander felt his knees give way as he recognized the bracelet he'd given Emily for her 8th birthday. She's alive, Sarah whispered. But finding her won't be easy. The Goldsteins have her hidden away, along with others. That's why I took the documents, why I needed to find you. You have the resources to expose them, to bring them down, but we have to be careful. Regina Goldstein has people everywhere, including someone very close to you. A knock at the front door cut through the tension like a knife. Sarah leaped to her feet, all color draining from her face. Alexander moved instinctively to shield her, his mind racing through possibilities. The knock came again, more insistent this time. Mr. Sterling? A familiar voice called out. I know you're in there, we need to talk. Alexander's heart nearly stopped as he recognized the voice. It belonged to James Morrison, his oldest friend and business partner, the man who had stood by his side through Emily's disappearance, who had helped him build his empire from the ground up, the man who, according to the notebook in his hands, had been on Regina Goldstein's payroll for the past decade. Alexander's mind raced through years of memories, re-examining every interaction with James through this new lens of betrayal. How many times had his oldest friend steered his business decisions in directions that mysteriously benefited the Goldstein family? How many coincidental meetings and introductions had been carefully orchestrated? Sarah tugged at his sleeve, pointing toward the brownstone's back exit. Her eyes held a wisdom far beyond her years, communicating without words the danger they faced. But Alexander stood rooted to the spot, decades of friendship warring with the evidence in his hands. Alex, please, James called again, his voice taking on an edge of urgency. Regina just wants to talk. No one needs to get hurt. The casual mention of Regina Goldstein confirmed everything. Alexander felt a cold clarity settle over him, the same sensation he experienced before making billion-dollar business decisions. He gestured for Sarah to stay quiet and moved toward the kitchen, where a hidden panel in the pantry concealed a state-of-the-art security system. With quick, practiced movements, he activated the house's defensive protocols. Metal shutters, silently, slid down over the windows, the front and back doors sealed with reinforced bolts. A small screen showed James standing on the front step, alone for now, but Alexander had no doubt backup waited nearby. Think about what you're doing, James continued, his tone shifting to the one he used during difficult negotiations. You've built an empire, Alex. Don't throw it all away for some street kid's fairy tales. Sarah appeared at Alexander's side, her face set in determined lines. She pulled a small phone from her pocket, not a sleek smartphone, but an old-style flip phone, and pressed it into his hands. Call this number, she whispered. Ask for Marcus Reed. He's been investigating the Goldsteins for years. He can help us. Alexander studied the phone, noting its deliberate simplicity, untraceable, smart. He dialed the number, watching on the security screen as James made a call of his own. A man's voice answered on the second ring. This isn't a secure line. My name is Alexander Sterling, he said quietly. I'm with the girl. We have the documents. A sharp intake of breath. Sterling, the tech mogul, stay where you are. I'm 20 minutes out. Can you hold that long? Alexander glanced at the security feed. 3 more figures had joined James, their stances suggesting professional training. We'll have to, but hurry. He ended the call and turned to Sarah. This Marcus Reed, you trust him? As much as I trust anyone, she replied. He's a journalist, independent. He's been collecting evidence against the Goldsteins for years, building a case, but he needs what we have to bring it all together. The sound of breaking glass echoed from upstairs. Sarah flinched, but Alexander smiled grimly. The security system had recorded the attempt and would provide valuable evidence later. More importantly, the reinforced windows would hold. "Your friend James," Sarah said softly. "He was there too the day they took Emily. He was in the black SUV." The revelation hit Alexander like a physical blow. James had been at his side through everything. The frantic searching, the sleepless nights, the gradual loss of hope. He'd watched Alexander's life crumble while knowing exactly what had happened to Emily. "The notebook," Alexander said suddenly. "The evidence about Emily. It's not just about her disappearance, is it? It's about why they took her." Sarah nodded slowly. "Your company, Sterling Tech, was developing something they wanted. A new encryption system that could track international financial transactions. They needed leverage over you. Emily was that leverage. But I shut that project down after she disappeared," Alexander whispered. I thought it might have made us a target, that someone might have taken her to get to the technology. They let you believe that, but they kept Emily to ensure you'd never restart the project. And James made sure you focused on other ventures, steered you away from anything that might threaten their operations." The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Every business decision he'd made in the past 8 years had been subtly influenced, guided by the man he trusted most. His entire empire had been built on a foundation of manipulation and betrayal. A heavy impact shook the front door. Alexander checked the security feed again. The number of figures outside had doubled. James stood slightly apart from them, speaking urgently into his phone. Even through the grainy footage, Alexander could read the tension in his old friend's posture. "Marcus, better hurry," Sarah muttered, her eyes fixed on the security screen. "They're calling in reinforcements." Alexander squared his shoulders, feeling a familiar rush of adrenaline. This was familiar territory, being surrounded, outnumbered, with everything on the line. Only this time, he wasn't fighting for market share or profit margins. He was fighting for something far more precious. "Tell me everything you know about where they're keeping Emily," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos unfolding outside. "Every detail, no matter how small, because when Marcus gets here, we're not just going to expose their operation, we're going to bring my daughter home." Sarah met his gaze, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of real hope in her eyes. She reached for the notebook, flipping to a page marked with a folded corner. "It starts with a property in upstate New York," she began, "a private school that only exists on paper." The minutes crawled by like hours as Alexander and Sarah waited in the fortified brownstone. Each impact against the reinforced doors and windows sent vibrations through the building's frame. The security feeds showed more figures arriving, their movements suggesting military precision. 7 minutes. Alexander muttered, checking his watch again. "Marcus should be here in 7 minutes. Sarah paced the room with nervous energy, her small fingers tracing patterns on the notebook's worn cover. "We need a backup plan," she said. "The Goldsteins never leave anything to chance. They'll have people watching every exit, every possible escape route." Alexander nodded, his mind already racing through contingencies. Years of corporate takeovers had taught him to always have multiple strategies in play. He moved to a painting on the wall, swinging it aside to reveal a wall safe. Inside lay several passports, stacks of cash in various currencies, and a small tablet. "The building's original blueprints," he explained, powering up the tablet. "When I bought this place, I had some modifications made. There's a tunnel system running under the street, connecting to the subway maintenance passages. It was meant as an emergency exit." Sarah's eyes lit up with understanding. "The Goldsteins won't know about it if you kept the construction off official records." "Exactly. James knows I have contingency plans, but he doesn't know the details. I've learned to keep some secrets even from my closest allies." The irony of his words wasn't lost on either of them. A new sound cut through the chaos. Police. Sirens in the distance, growing closer. Sarah tensed, her expression darkening. "They're not real police," she said with certainty. "The Goldsteins have people in law enforcement. They'll use the sirens as cover to move in without attracting attention. Alexander's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. 2 minutes out, south side. Be ready to move. Marcus, Sarah. Confirmed, reading over his shoulder. But how are we going to reach him with everyone surrounding the building? Alexander pulled up the blueprint on the tablet, his fingers tracing a path through the underground passages. There's a maintenance access point 2 blocks south. If Marcus can create a distraction. As if on cue, a series of explosions rocked the night. Car alarms blared and shouts of confusion erupted from outside. The security feeds showed smoke billowing across the street as several vehicles' tires simultaneously burst. Now, Alexander commanded, leading Sarah toward the hidden entrance, to the tunnel system. A bookcase slid aside, revealing a narrow passage equipped with emergency lighting. They descended quickly, Alexander sealing the entrance behind them. The tunnel was cramped but well maintained, clearly designed for quick escapes. Their footsteps echoed off the concrete walls as they moved swiftly through the darkness. "How did you get involved with the Goldsteins?" Alexander asked as they walked, partly to distract Sarah from their claustrophobic surroundings, partly because he needed to understand. Sarah's voice was quiet but steady. "They find children who won't be missed. Orphans, runaways, kids in the system. They offer a better life, good food, nice clothes, education. But it's all a trap. Once they have you, they own you." "But you escaped." "Not exactly." Sarah's hand went to her pocket, where Alexander glimpsed something metallic. "I had help. There's a group working against the Goldsteins from the inside. They've been gathering evidence for years, waiting for the right moment. When I found out about Emily, about the connection to you, they helped me get out." They reached a junction in the tunnel system. Alexander consulted the tablet, choosing the path that would lead them south. The sounds of chaos from above were muffled but still audible. "The school you mentioned," he said, thinking of the notebook's contents. "The one that only exists on paper. Tell me about it." "Riverside Academy for Gifted Children," Sarah recited. "It looks perfect on the outside. Exclusive, prestigious, invitation only, but it's really a training ground. They teach us how to move money, hide documents, create false trails. The younger ones, like me, they use for special tasks. Who suspects a child?" Alexander's stomach churned at the implications. "And Emily? She's there?" "She was. They moved her last year. But I know where." Sarah stopped suddenly, pressing against the wall. "Listen." Footsteps echoed through the tunnel ahead of them, accompanied by the beam of a flashlight. Alexander pushed Sarah behind him, his body tense. The light grew closer, and a familiar voice called out, "Mr. Sterling, I'm Marcus. Read. Sarah knows me." A man emerged from the darkness, tall, lean, with graying hair and alert eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He wore casual clothes that had seen better days, and a camera hung around his neck. Sarah stepped forward, relief evident in her posture. "Marcus, you got our message." "Barely in time," he replied grimly. "Regina's going all out on this one. She's called in every favor, activated every asset. Half the city's looking for you too." Alexander studied the journalist carefully. "Why are you helping us? What's your stake in this?" Marcus's expression hardened. "The Goldsteins destroyed my family 15 years ago when I got too close to exposing one of their operations. I've been building a case against them ever since, but they're careful. They never leave evidence that can't be explained away or buried. In legal proceedings." He gestured to the notebook Sarah clutched. "But with those documents and your testimony as one of the city's most prominent businessmen, we might finally have a chance to bring them down." A distant explosion rocked the tunnel, sending dust cascading from the ceiling. Marcus glanced nervously over his shoulder. "We need to move. I have a safe house outside the city, but we'll never make it if we don't get out of here first. And Mr. Sterling?" Marcus's eyes were deadly serious. "Once we surface, you need to be prepared. Everything you think you know about your life, your business, your relationships, it's all about to change." Alexander thought of James, standing outside the brownstone of all the years of manipulated friendship. He thought of Emily, hidden away in some false school, growing up without her father. His voice was steel when he replied, "It already has." The journey through New York's underground maze felt endless. Marcus led them through a series of maintenance tunnels and abandoned subway passages, his movements suggesting intimate familiarity with the city's hidden architecture. Sarah kept pace easily, but Alexander found himself struggling with the uneven ground and low ceilings. "There's an access point ahead," Marcus whispered, consulting a worn paper map. "It'll bring us up near the industrial district. I have a car waiting." "They'll be watching the streets," Sarah warned. "The Goldsteins have surveillance teams everywhere." Marcus smiled grimly. "That's counting on. Sometimes the best hiding place is right in plain sight." They emerged into a loading dock behind a busy warehouse. Trucks moved in and out steadily. Workers focused on their tasks in the harsh artificial light. Marcus led them to a battered delivery van, its sides covered in faded advertising for a local bakery. "Your chariot awaits," he said, sliding open the side door. The interior had been modified with reinforced walls and a hidden compartment under the floor. As they settled into the van, Alexander's mind raced through the implications of their situation. His entire world had shifted in the span of a few hours. The empire he'd built, the relationships he'd trusted, all of it was tainted by the Goldsteins' influence. "Tell me about the evidence," Marcus said, as he navigated through the industrial district. "What exactly did Sarah bring you?" Alexander opened the notebook, its pages now familiar from his earlier reading. Banking records, property deeds, shell company documentation, but it's more than that. There are names, judges, politicians, business leaders, everyone the Goldsteins have compromised or corrupted, including people in your own company," Marcus added quietly. Alexander's jaw tightened. "Yes. The notebook shows regular payments to at least 3 of my senior executives, going back years. And James has been their inside man from the beginning." Sarah, who had been watching the streets intently, turned to face them. "Tell him about Emily's project, Marcus. Tell him what they really wanted." Marcus glanced in the rearview mirror, his expression grave. Sterling Tech's tracking system wasn't just about monitoring financial transactions. It could identify patterns, connect seemingly unrelated accounts and entities. If it had gone live, it would have exposed the entire network of shell companies and hidden assets that families like the Goldsteins rely on. "But I abandoned the project," Alexander protested. "After Emily disappeared, I shut everything down." "They needed to be sure you'd never restart it," Sarah explained. "Having Emily wasn't just about controlling you. It was insurance. As long as they had her, you'd never risk developing anything that might threaten their operations." The van turned onto a quiet residential street, moving away from the city's heart. Alexander noticed Marcus taking a complex route, doubling back occasionally, watching for any signs of pursuit. "The safe house isn't far," Marcus said. "But before we get there, you need to understand what we're up against. Regina Goldstein isn't just some corrupt businesswoman. She's the architect of a system that's been in place for generations. The schools, the children they use, the network of compromised officials. It's all designed to be invisible, untraceable." "Until now," Sarah added, patting the notebook. Alexander stared out the window, watching the city lights grow dimmer as they moved into the suburbs. "All these years," he murmured, "I thought I was protecting Emily by staying away from anything that might have led to her kidnappers, but I was just playing into their hands." "You couldn't have known," Marcus said kindly. "They're experts at manipulation. They make you think you're making your own choices while they're pulling all the strings." The van slowed, turning onto a tree-lined street of modest homes. Marcus pulled into a garage attached to a small ranch house, the door closing automatically behind them. "Welcome to my humble abode," he said, cutting the engine. "It's not much, but it's secure. Faraday cage built into the walls, white noise generators, and a direct link to my private server network. We can start going through the evidence properly here." As they entered the house, Sarah moved with practiced efficiency, checking windows and exits. Alexander watched her, noting how she positioned herself to keep both men in view while maintaining clear paths to potential escape routes. "You said there's a group working against the Goldsteins from the inside," Alexander remembered. "Who are they?" Sarah and Marcus exchanged glances. Former students, Sarah said finally. People who got out, or whose children were taken. They've been building a case for years, gathering evidence piece by piece, but they needed someone with power, someone the public would listen to. Someone like me, Alexander concluded. Marcus nodded, moving to a locked cabinet in his study. We have one chance to get this right, he said, removing a laptop and several external hard drives. The evidence in that notebook, combined with your testimony and Sarah's inside knowledge, it could bring down not just the Goldsteins, but their entire network. And lead us to Emily, Sarah added softly. Alexander felt a familiar surge of determination, the same feeling that had driven him to build his business empire, but this time the stakes were infinitely higher than market shares or profit margins. Then let's get to work, he said, placing the notebook on Marcus's desk. Tell me everything you know about Riverside Academy. Marcus's study transformed into a command center as screens flickered to life, displaying maps, documents, and surveillance footage. The notebook lay open on the central desk, its pages spread out alongside printouts and photographs. Alexander leaned forward, studying a satellite image of a sprawling estate nestled in the Hudson Valley. Riverside Academy, Marcus explained, zooming in on the main building. On paper, it's a prestigious private school for gifted children. 300 acres, state-of-the-art facilities, a waiting list a mile long. Parents would give anything to get their children admitted. But they don't take just any children, do they? Alexander asked, his voice tight with controlled anger. Sarah shook her head, her small frame perched on the edge of a leather chair. They choose carefully. Some, like me, are selected because we have no one to miss us. Others, like Emily, are taken to control their parents. But all of us serve a purpose in their operation. Alexander's fingers traced the outline of the academy grounds. Tell me about the security. How do we get in? It's not that simple, Marcus cautioned. The academy is just the visible part. Underground, there's an extensive network of facilities, training rooms, document forgery workshops, computer labs where they teach the children to move money through digital mazes. Sarah stood and moved to the map, pointing to specific locations. The main security center is here, disguised as the administration building. Guards patrol the grounds 24/7, but they look like normal security staff. The real protection is more subtle. Biometric scanners, motion sensors, and AI-powered surveillance. Our systems. The children themselves are part of the security, she continued, her voice taking on a distant quality. We're trained to report anything unusual, any potential threats to the system. Those who prove most loyal are given special privileges, more freedom of movement. Alexander studied Sarah's face, noting the pain behind her composed expression. How did you get out? A ghost of a smile crossed her features. I had help. There's a network of former students. They call themselves the Light Keepers. They work to identify children who might be willing to turn against the Goldsteins, help them escape when the time is right. Marcus pulled up another screen, this one showing a series of photographs. The Light Keepers have been crucial to our investigation. They provide safe houses, false documentation, and most importantly, inside information. Some of them have managed to maintain their cover within the Goldstein organization for years. Show him the underground levels, Sarah urged, her eyes fixed on the academy blueprints. Marcus typed quickly, bringing up a series of architectural drawings. The official plans show only 2 basement levels, storage and maintenance, but our sources confirm at least 5 additional subterranean floors. That's where they keep the most valuable assets. The children they need to control most carefully, Sarah clarified, the ones whose parents pose the biggest threats to their operation. Alexander's heart clenched. Emily? Level B5, Sarah confirmed. I saw her there 6 months ago. They move the high-value assets regularly, but they always keep them deep underground. It's not just about security, it's psychological. The deeper you go, the more impossible escape seems. Alexander stood abruptly, pacing the room as he processed this information. All these years, he muttered, I've been looking in the wrong places, following false leads. Meanwhile, she's been there, underground, thinking I abandoned her. She knows you didn't, Sarah said quietly. The Goldsteins make sure their captives understand exactly why they're being held. It helps maintain control. Knowing your loved ones are being manipulated but being unable to do anything about it. Marcus cleared his throat. There's something else you need to see. He pulled up a series of financial records from the notebook. These transactions, they're not just about moving money, they're preparations. Sarah leaned forward, her expression sharpening. They're getting ready to move everything. The academy, the children, the whole operation. Why now? Alexander demanded. Because of this, Marcus said, displaying a news article about Sterling Tech's latest acquisition. Your company just bought Quantum Dynamics. Their quantum computing research could revolutionize encryption technology, exactly what the Goldsteins have been trying to prevent. James advised me on that acquisition, Alexander realized. He pushed hard for it, said it would give us a competitive edge. He was setting you up, Sarah explained. Once the deal went through, the Goldsteins would have legitimate access to quantum computing research through their connections in your company. They could adapt their operations before the technology could be used against them. And then they'd eliminate the threat permanently, Marcus added grimly. And with both you and Emily gone, there'd be no one left to expose their operation. Alexander's business instincts kicked in, analyzing the situation with cold clarity. So we have a window of opportunity. Before they can complete the transfer. 12 operations. Sarah nodded. But it's not just about getting Emily out anymore. The documents in that notebook, they could bring down the entire network. If we can expose everything at once, we'd need to coordinate multiple operations, Marcus mused. Hit them simultaneously at different locations, prevent them from destroying evidence or moving assets. The Lightkeepers could help, Sarah suggested. They have people in place throughout the organization. With enough planning, Alexander held up a hand, his expression determined. First things first. You said Emily's on level B5. Start there, tell me everything about the layout, security protocols, guard rotations, every detail. As Sarah began describing the underground facilities, Alexander's mind was already racing ahead, forming strategies and contingency plans. But this wasn't like his corporate takeovers. This time he wasn't fighting for market share or profit margins. This time he was fighting for his daughter's freedom. And he would need every resource, every ally, and every bit of cunning he possessed to succeed. As dawn approached, Marcus's study buzzed with focused energy. Multiple screens displayed blueprints, security protocols, and surveillance footage, while Sarah meticulously detailed the Academy's internal operations. Alexander absorbed every word, his analytical mind mapping out potential strategies. The Lightkeepers, he said suddenly, interrupting Sarah's description of the underground ventilation systems. Tell me more about them. Who are they? How are they organized? Marcus exchanged glances with Sarah before pulling up a new file on his computer. They started small, just a few former students who managed to break free from the Goldsteins' control. But over the years, they've built an impressive network. Show him the leadership structure, Sarah suggested, moving closer to the screen. The display showed a complex organizational chart with code names and encrypted contact protocols. They operate in cells, Marcus explained. Each group works independently, knowing only their immediate contacts. It's safer that way. If one cell is compromised, the others remain secure. Some work within the Goldstein organization, Sarah added. Teachers at the academy, security personnel, even a few administrators. Others provide external support, safe houses, transportation, document forgery. And some, like Marcus, gather intelligence and build cases against the family. Alexander studied the chart intently. And they've never been detected? There have been close calls, Sarah admitted. The Goldsteins are paranoid about internal threats. They run constant security checks, loyalty tests. But the Lightkeepers are patient. They place people carefully, build their covers over years. Which brings us to an important point, Marcus interjected. We're not just planning a rescue mission. We're talking about dismantling a decades-old criminal enterprise. The Lightkeepers have been waiting for an opportunity like this. Someone with your resources and public profile, combined with hard evidence of the Goldsteins' operations. Alexander nodded slowly. The notebook provides the evidence, and my testimony gives it credibility. But we'd need more than that to ensure the whole network comes down. That's where the timing becomes crucial, Sarah said, pulling up a calendar on one of the screens. In 3 weeks, the Academy hosts its annual fundraising gala. It's the only time outsiders are allowed on the property in significant numbers. Regina Goldstein's pride and joy, Marcus added. She uses it to showcase the Academy's legitimate face. Wealthy donors, politicians, business leaders, all gathering to support gifted education. The security is intense, but it's also the only time when their normal protocols are disrupted. Alexander's eyes narrowed. And the Lightkeepers have people inside the security team. Better than that, Sarah smiled. They have people planning the event. The head of logistics is one of ours. She's been undercover for 5 years, slowly working her way up to a position where she can influence security arrangements. But we have a problem, Marcus cautioned. Regina's pushing to accelerate the timeline for moving the operation. Our sources indicate she wants everything relocated before the quantum computing research begins at Sterling Tech. Alexander stood, moving to the window where the first hints of dawn painted the sky. Then we don't wait for the gala. We use their own urgency against them. If they're rushing to move everything, they'll make mistakes. Security protocols will be disrupted, attention divided. Sarah's eyes lit up with understanding. The children will be moved first. They're the most valuable assets. They'll want them secured at the new location before transferring the documentation and equipment. Which means increased activity in the underground levels, Marcus mused. More staff movement, more opportunities for things to go wrong. We need to coordinate with the Lightkeepers, Alexander decided. How soon can you arrange a meeting? Marcus checked his phone. Their protocol requires 24 hours notice for face-to-face meetings, but given the circumstances, they might make an exception. Sarah moved to Alexander's side, her small hand touching his arm. There's something else you should know about Emily. Alexander turned, studying her face. What is it? She's not just a prisoner anymore. Over the years, they've been training her just like they trained me. She has skills now, computer programming, financial analysis, document forgery. They're grooming her to take an active role in their operation. Using her intelligence against her, Alexander growled. No, Sarah corrected gently. Using it for her survival. Emily's smart. She plays along, makes them think she's accepting their control. But she watches, learns, remembers. The Lightkeepers have been watching her for months. They think she's ready to help from the inside. The implications hit Alexander like a physical blow. His daughter wasn't just a victim to be rescued. She was a potential ally, someone who might be able to act when the moment came. Marcus cleared his throat. There's a safe house in Connecticut where the Lightkeepers Leadership Council meets. If we leave now, we could be there by midday. But once we start this, there's no turning back. The Goldsteins will know we're coming. Alexander thought of James, his oldest friend turned traitor, of Regina Goldstein at her charity galas, hiding, evil behind a philanthropist's smile, of Emily growing up underground, playing a deadly game of survival and deception. His voice was steel when he replied, They already know we're coming. What they don't know is that we're not just fighting to save Emily anymore. We're fighting to bring down their entire world. Sarah smiled, a fierce expression that made her look older than her years. Then let's go meet the Lightkeepers. It's time to step out of the shadows. The Connecticut safe house looked unremarkable from the outside, a weathered farmhouse set back from the road, surrounded by ancient maple trees. But as Marcus guided their vehicle up the gravel driveway, Alexander noticed subtle signs of sophisticated security. Cameras disguised as birdhouses, motion sensors hidden in garden ornaments, and what appeared to be a state-of-the-art retinal scanner masked as a peephole in the front door. The Lightkeepers don't believe in taking chances, Sarah explained, catching his observant gaze. Every safe house is equipped with multiple escape routes and defense systems. We learned from hard experience that the Goldsteins' reach is long. The front door opened before they reached it, revealing a tall woman with silver-streaked hair and sharp green eyes. She nodded to Marcus and Sarah before fixing her penetrating gaze on Alexander. Mr. Sterling, she said, her voice carrying a hint of an Eastern European accent. I'm Diana. Welcome to our humble headquarters. Inside, the farmhouse's rustic exterior gave way to a sophisticated command center. The living room had been converted into a high-tech operations room with multiple workstations and wall-mounted displays showing various surveillance feeds. Around a large conference table sat 5 individuals, each radiating an aura of quiet authority. "The Council of Light," Marcus announced. "Our leadership team." Diana took her place at the head of the table, gesturing for Alexander to sit. "We've been following your situation closely, Mr. Sterling. The Goldsteins' reaction to your discovery of the notebook confirms what we've long suspected. They're becoming desperate. Desperate enough to make mistakes," added a younger man with wire-rimmed glasses. "I'm Carter. I oversee our intelligence operations within the Academy. My team has noticed increased activity in the underground levels over the past 48 hours. They're preparing to move," Sarah confirmed, taking a seat beside Alexander. "But they're rushing, breaking their own security protocols. Which gives us an opportunity," said a woman with close-cropped grey hair and military bearing. "I'm Colonel Hayes, retired officially. Unofficially, I coordinate our tactical operations. The accelerated timeline means they'll have to move the children in larger groups than usual." Alexander leaned forward. "Tell me about the security around Emily. Sarah mentioned she's on level B5. A soft-spoken man with weathered features spoke up. "Michael Chen, Internal Operations. Your daughter has earned a degree of trust over the years. She's allowed limited movement within the secure levels, helping with their financial operations. But she's watched constantly. The Goldsteins never fully trust anyone, especially not the children of those they've wronged," added the 5th council member, an elegant woman with silver jewelry and keen, dark eyes. "I'm Isabella. I was taken by the Goldsteins 30 years ago when my father discovered their involvement in international banking fraud. I founded the Light Keepers after I escaped." Alexander studied each face around the table, reading the mix of determination and carefully controlled anger in their expressions. "How many others are there? How deep does your network go?" "Over 300 active members," Diana replied. "Teachers, security personnel, maintenance workers, even a few in Regina Goldstein's inner circle. We've spent years placing our people strategically throughout their organization. But we've never had a chance like this," Carter added, gesturing to the notebook that lay on the table. "Hard evidence combined with your public profile and business connections, we could expose everything." Colonel Hayes pulled up a detailed schematic of the Academy on the main display. "We've developed multiple extraction scenarios over the years, but the accelerated timeline changes things. We'll need to move fast, hit them from multiple angles." "Tell me about the quantum computing angle," Alexander said. "How does that fit into their plans?" Isabella's expression darkened. "The Goldsteins' power comes from their ability to move money invisibly, to hide their operations behind layers of encryption and misdirection. Quantum computing could change that, make it possible to crack their codes, trace their transactions. Which is why they manipulated me into buying quantum dynamics," Alexander concluded. "They want to control the technology before it can be used against them." "Exactly," Michael confirmed. "But their rush to secure the research has created vulnerabilities. We have confirmation that they're planning to move the children within the next 72 hours. Sarah stood suddenly, moving to the schematic display. "Look at the pathway they'll have to use," she said, tracing a route through the underground levels. "The main elevator can only move small groups. For a large-scale transfer, they'll have to use the emergency evacuation tunnel." Colonel Hayes nodded approvingly. "A bottleneck, we could use that." "But we need more than just a rescue mission," Diana cautioned. "This is our chance to bring down their entire operation. We need to secure the evidence, prevent them from destroying documents or moving assets." "We'll need multiple teams," Carter mused. "One for the extraction, others to secure the evidence and prevent any counter-moves by Regina's people." Alexander thought of James, wondering how many other trusted associates would turn against him when the moment came. What about loyalty? How can we be sure everyone involved is committed? Isabella smiled grimly. "Every member of the Lightkeepers has lost something to the Goldsteins: family, freedom, innocence. Our loyalty is bound by shared pain and a common purpose. And now," Diana added, "we have something we've never had before, a chance to Expose their crimes to the world with evidence that can't be buried or explained away. Alexander stood, his decision made. Then let's make it count. Tell me exactly what you need from me. The council members exchanged glances, and Diana nodded. First, she said, we need you to understand exactly what we're up against. Regina. Goldstein isn't just protecting her family's criminal enterprise. She's protecting a system that's been in place for generations. A system that turns children into tools, that destroys families to maintain control. I understand, Alexander replied, his voice hard. And I'm ready to help bring it down. Good, Colonel Hayes said, standing to join him at the display. Then, let's talk strategy. We have 72 hours to plan and execute the most complicated operation in Lightkeeper history. As the council began outlining their plan, Alexander felt a fierce hope rising in his chest. For the first time in 8 years, he wasn't just chasing shadows. He had allies, resources, and a clear path to his daughter. The Goldsteins thought they were rushing to protect their empire. Instead, they were rushing headlong into their own destruction. The next 12 hours passed in a blur of strategic planning and preparation. The farmhouse's operations room hummed with activity as the Lightkeepers mobilized their network. Alexander watched in amazement as the complex plan took shape, each piece carefully orchestrated for maximum impact. Our biggest advantage is their rush to move everything, Colonel Hayes explained, pointing to a timeline displayed on the main screen. Regina's pushing for a complete transfer within 3 days. That means they'll have to bypass normal security protocols. Carter adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses, pulling up a series of personnel files. I've already activated our sleeper agents within the academy. They're reporting increased activity in the lower levels, staff transfers, equipment movement, document preparation. What about Emily? Alexander asked, studying the surveillance photos of his daughter. The images showed a teenager who bore a striking resemblance to her mother, but with his own determined set to her jaw. How do we let her know what's coming? Sarah stepped forward, her small face serious. I can get a message to her. The Lightkeepers have developed a coded communication system using the Academy's internal computer network. Emily will understand. She's been waiting for something. Like this. Isabella nodded approvingly. Your daughter has shown remarkable resilience, Mr. Sterling. She's maintained her cover while gathering information about the Goldsteins' operations. Some of our best intelligence has come from her observations. Pride mixed with pain in Alexander's chest. His daughter had grown up learning to be a spy in her own prison, waiting for a chance at freedom. Tell me about the evacuation tunnel, he said, focusing on the tactical details to keep his emotions in check. Michael pulled up a detailed cross-section of the underground levels. It's their emergency exit route, designed to evacuate the entire facility if necessary. The tunnel runs for 3 miles, emerging in an abandoned quarry north of the property. That's where they're most vulnerable, Colonel Hayes continued. The tunnel has security checkpoints, but they're designed for small groups moving in an emergency. Moving a large number of children and documents through that space will create bottlenecks. We'll need multiple teams, Diana mused, marking points on the schematic. One to secure the quarry exit, another to handle the checkpoints, and a third to manage the actual extraction. What about Regina? Alexander asked. She'll be coordinating everything from her office in the administration building. Carter smiled thinly. That's where you come in, Mr. Sterling. We need you to do what you do best. Arrange a business meeting. Understanding dawned. A distraction. Keep her focused on me while the operations unfold underground. Exactly, Isabella confirmed. Regina's pride is her weakness. The chance to confront you directly, to demonstrate her power over your family one last time, she won't be able to resist. Sarah tugged at Alexander's sleeve. There's something else you should know about Emily. The Goldsteins don't just keep her in the underground levels anymore. They've been testing her loyalty, giving her more access. She helps manage their encryption systems. Which means she has administrator access to their internal network, Carter added. If she chooses the right moment, she could disrupt their security systems. Give us the opening we need. Colonel Hayes spread a series of photos across the table, surveillance images of the academy grounds, guard rotations, security checkpoints. We'll need perfect timing. Every team has to move simultaneously, or the whole operation falls apart. The Goldsteins have contingency plans for everything, Michael warned. If they suspect a breach, they'll initiate emergency protocols. We'll have minutes at most to complete the extraction before the entire facility goes into lockdown. Diana turned to Alexander, her green eyes intense. Are you prepared for what this means? Once we start, there's no turning back. The Goldsteins will use every resource at their disposal to stop us. Alexander thought of James, of all the years of false friendship and manipulation, of Regina Goldstein's sophisticated facade hiding years of cruelty, of Emily growing up in an underground prison, learning to survive by her wits. I've spent 8 years building an empire, he said quietly. I'm prepared to sacrifice all of it to bring them down. Good, Colonel Hayes nodded, because we have one shot at this. If we fail, the Goldsteins will burn everything. Evidence, assets, witnesses. They'll disappear with the children, start over somewhere else. We can't let that happen. Sarah moved to the main display, pointing to a particular section of the underground schematic. This is where they keep their most sensitive documents. Level B6, below where they hold the children. The evidence in that room could expose decades of corruption. Our teams will need to move simultaneously, Isabella explained. While you're meeting with Regina, our people will secure the documents, disable security systems, and begin moving the children through the evacuation tunnel. What about James? Alexander asked. He'll expect to be part of any meeting with Regina? Carter's expression hardened. Let him come. The more of their key people we can keep occupied, the better our chances of success. Diana stood, her silver-streaked hair catching the light. We have 48 hours to put everything in place. Every person in this room has waited years for this opportunity. We cannot fail. Alexander looked around the table at these remarkable people, former victims who had turned their pain into purpose, who had spent years building a network dedicated to bringing down their oppressors. Then let's make sure we succeed, he said firmly. Tell me exactly what you need me to do. As the council began outlining his role in detail, Alexander felt a strange calm settle over him. The path ahead was dangerous, the stakes impossibly high. But for the first time in 8 years, he wasn't fighting alone. The Goldsteins had spent decades building their empire of secrets and shadows. In 48 hours, that empire would begin to crumble. The morning sun cast long shadows across the farmhouse's operations room as Alexander adjusted his tie, a gesture that felt surprisingly normal given the extraordinary circumstances. His Italian suit, retrieved from a lightkeeper's safe house, was a piece of his old life, a costume for the role he needed to play. Remember, Diana said, helping him attach a microscopic communications device to his collar. Regina will be looking for any sign of deception. She needs to believe you're there to negotiate. I've spent my career negotiating with sharks, Alexander replied, checking his reflection in a monitor's dark screen. Regina Goldstein is just another predator in an expensive suit. Sarah watched from her perch on a desk, her legs swinging nervously. But she's different from your business rivals. She enjoys playing with people's emotions, finding their weak spots. The meeting is scheduled for 2 o'clock, Carter announced, looking up from his laptop. Our sources confirm Regina's cleared. Her schedule. She's bringing in additional security. She's cautious but intrigued. Colonel Hayes spread a series of tactical maps across the main table. While you keep Regina occupied, our teams will move into position. Team Alpha will secure the quarry exit here. She pointed to a marked location. Team Bravo will handle the security checkpoints in the evacuation tunnel. And Team Charlie, Michael continued, will coordinate with our inside people to begin moving the children. We've identified 3 primary gathering points in the underground levels. Alexander studied the maps, memorizing key details. What about James? He'll be watching my every move. Isabella smiled grimly. Let him watch. We want him focused on you, not on what's happening below ground. His overconfidence will work in our favor. Our biggest advantage, Diana added, is their rushed timeline. They're so focused on moving their operation that they won't expect us to strike during the transfer preparations. Sarah slipped off the desk and moved to Alexander's side. I should be going with you, she said quietly. I know the facility, the security protocols. No, Alexander and Diana said simultaneously. Diana continued, You're too valuable, Sarah. If Regina sees you, she'll know something's wrong. Besides, we need you to coordinate with Emily through the internal network. Carter adjusted his glasses, bringing up a series of security camera feeds on the main display. Our people inside. The Academy have confirmed Emily's current location. She's working in the encryption center on level B5, helping prepare for the transfer. She's in the perfect position to help us, Michael noted. When the time comes, she'll have access to critical systems. Alexander's throat tightened at the image of his daughter on the screen. Even through the grainy security footage, he could see how much she'd grown, how she carried herself with careful precision. 8 years of captivity had turned his little girl into a survivor. The next few hours are critical, Colonel Hayes said, checking her watch. Our teams are moving into position around the Academy perimeter. Once you enter that meeting, Mr. Sterling, everything has to happen according to plan. What if Regina suspects something? Sarah asked, voicing the fear they'd all been avoiding. What if she orders an immediate lockdown? Isabella's expression hardened. That's why we have contingency plans. If things go wrong, our priority is getting the children out. The evidence, the arrests, all of that becomes secondary. But it won't go wrong, Diana said firmly. We've spent years preparing for this. Every person involved knows exactly what to do. Alexander checked his own watch. A sophisticated piece of technology disguised as a simple luxury timepiece. It would allow the lightkeepers to track his location and vital signs throughout the operation. There's something else you should know, Carter said, his voice serious. We've intercepted communications suggesting Regina's planned for various scenarios, including the possibility of you trying something like this. She's arranged for emergency transport, Michael explained. If she feels threatened, she has means to escape with key assets, including Emily. Alexander's jaw tightened. Then we don't give her the chance. How long until the teams are in position? 90 minutes, Colonel Hayes replied. Team Alpha is already securing the quarry. Team Bravo moves in through maintenance access points over the next hour. Team Charlie is assembled and waiting for the signal. Sarah moved to the communication station, putting on a headset. I'll establish contact with Emily as soon as you enter the meeting. She'll be waiting for the signal to begin disrupting their systems. Diana placed a hand on Alexander's shoulder. Remember, this isn't just about Emily anymore. We have a chance to free all the children, to expose decades of corruption and abuse, but everything depends on timing. Alexander nodded, understanding the weight of responsibility. This wasn't like his corporate takeovers, where the worst consequence was financial loss. Lives hung in the balance, not just Emily's, but dozens of children trapped in the Goldsteins' web of control. One last thing, Isabella said, handing him a small flash drive. If everything goes wrong, if you need a last resort, this contains enough evidence to expose everything. Regina doesn't know we have these files. They're your insurance policy. Alexander slipped the drive into his pocket, feeling its weight like a lifeline. He looked around the room at these remarkable people, former victims turned warriors, each carrying their own scars from the Goldsteins' cruelty. It's time, Colonel Hayes announced, checking the tactical displays one final time. The operation is a go. As Alexander straightened his tie one last time, Sarah caught his hand. Bring her home, she whispered. Bring them all home. He squeezed her small fingers, making a silent promise. Then he turned toward the door, toward the confrontation that would either free his daughter or destroy everything he'd fought for. The end game was about to begin. Riverside Academy rose before Alexander like a monument to deception, its elegant Georgian architecture and manicured grounds masking the darkness that lurked beneath. As he drove through the ornate gates, he noted the increased security presence, subtle but unmistakable to his trained eye. Security teams in position, Colonel Hayes's voice whispered through his hidden earpiece. "Surveillance confirms Regina's in her office. James arrived 10 minutes ago." Alexander parked his Bentley in the visitor's space, directly in view of the administration building's cameras. Every movement now was a message: confidence, control, the bearing of a man who believed he held the upper hand. "Remember," Diana's voice added, "she'll try to provoke an emotional response. Stay focused on the business angle." The main entrance opened as he approached, and James Morrison stepped out to greet him. His oldest friend's smile looked genuine, a testament to years of practiced deception. "Alex," James called warmly, "thank you for coming on such short notice." "Regina's eager to discuss the quantum dynamics integration." Alexander returned the smile, feeling the weight of the hidden flash drive in his pocket. "James, I assume you've analyzed the preliminary reports?" "Of course, shall we?" James gestured toward the building's interior, falling into step beside Alexander as they crossed the marble-floored lobby. Through his earpiece, Alexander could hear the quiet communications of the Lightkeeper teams. Team Bravo in position at Checkpoint 1. Team Charlie beginning Phase 1 of gathering operations. The administration building's top floor offered a commanding view of the academy grounds. Regina Goldstein's office was a study in calculated intimidation, floor-to-ceiling windows, priceless art, and subtle reminders of her family's power and influence. Regina herself rose from behind a massive desk as they entered. In her early 50s, she carried herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to absolute control. Her smile was practiced, precise, revealing nothing of the predator beneath. "Alexander Sterling," she said warmly, "I've been looking forward to meeting properly. Your acquisition of quantum dynamics was quite impressive." "Regina," Alexander nodded, taking the offered seat, "I must admit, I was intrigued by your invitation. It's not often a competitor reaches out so directly." "Competitor?" Regina's laugh was musical. "My dear Mr. Sterling, I think we both know our interests are more aligned than that." Through the earpiece, Carter's voice whispered, "Emily's logged into the encryption center. Sarah's establishing contact now." Alexander kept his expression neutral as James poured drinks, expensive scotch in crystal glasses. A power play, reminding him of their shared world of wealth and influence. "The quantum computing research," Regina continued, settling gracefully into her chair. "It has my fascinating implications for data security. My family's banking interests are naturally concerned about potential disruptions to established systems." "Banking interests," Alexander echoed, taking a deliberate sip of scotch. "Is that what we're calling it now?" A flicker of something crossed Regina's face, awareness perhaps that the game was shifting. "I believe in being direct, Mr. Sterling. Your company's research could destabilize certain financial arrangements that benefit many powerful people." "Team Alpha reports movement at the quarry entrance," Colonel Hayes murmured in his ear. "Standard patrol, no indication they've detected our presence." Alexander set his glass down carefully. "And these arrangements, they require what exactly? Children to move your money? Young lives to ensure compliance?" Regina's smile didn't waver, but her eyes hardened. "I see Sarah found you. I was wondering where our little runaway had gone." "Sarah was very informative," Alexander agreed, maintaining eye contact, "though not as informative as your own records." James shifted slightly, his hand moving toward his jacket, but Regina raised a manicured hand, stopping him. "The notebook," she said calmly. "A regrettable security breach. But surely a businessman of your caliber understands the value of discretion. There are deals to be made, Mr. Sterling, mutually beneficial arrangements." Through the earpiece, Michael's voice was tense. "First group of children moving toward Checkpoint 1. Emily's starting the security system disruption." Alexander leaned forward slightly. "Let's talk about arrangements, Regina. Let's talk about a little girl who disappeared 8 years ago. Let's talk about a father who spent every day since then looking for answers." "Ah," Regina's smile turned sympathetic. "Emily. Such a bright child. She's flourished here, you know. Her aptitude for encryption is remarkable." The casual mention of his daughter sent a spike of rage through Alexander's chest, but he kept his voice steady. "You took her to control me, to protect your operation from my company's research. We gave her opportunities," Regina corrected, "structure, purpose. While you built your empire, we shaped her potential. And now?" She spread her hands. "Now you have a choice, Mr. Sterling. Join us. Be part of your daughter's life again, under the right circumstances." "Team Charlie reports first group through checkpoint 1, Colonel Hayes whispered, "proceeding to evacuation route." Alexander studied Regina's face, seeing the absolute conviction of someone who believed in their own righteousness. "You really don't see it, do you? The lives you've destroyed, the families you've torn apart, it's all just business to you." "Everything is business," Regina replied smoothly. "Surely you of all people understand that. How many companies have you dismantled? How many lives have your hostile takeovers disrupted? We simply operate on a different scale." James moved to stand behind Regina's chair, his posture protective. Alexander wondered how long his old friend had been her guardian. How many years of friendship had been nothing but calculated manipulation. "Second group moving to checkpoint 1, Michael reported. "Emily's locked down internal communications on level B5. Alexander reached for his scotch glass, using the movement to check his watch. The operation was proceeding exactly as planned. Now he just had to keep Regina talking, keep her focused on the perceived threat in front of her, rather than the real one unfolding beneath her feet. "Tell me about the quantum computing research," he said, settling back in his chair. "What exactly are you afraid we'll find?" Deep beneath Riverside Academy, Emily Sterling's fingers flew across a keyboard, her movements precise and deliberate. The encryption center's screens bathed her face in a blue glow as she systematically disrupted the facility's security systems. 8 years of watching, learning, and waiting had prepared her for this moment. "Security protocols disabled on level B4, she murmured into her headset, using the coded language she'd learned from the Lightkeepers. "Surveillance loops engaged." Sarah's familiar voice responded through her earpiece. "Confirmed. Team Charlie moving to Phase 3. Emily, your father's upstairs." Emily's hands stilled for just a moment, emotion threatening to break her carefully maintained composure. She'd imagined this day countless times, but now that it was here, the reality was almost overwhelming. "Focus on the mission," she whispered. To herself, resuming her work. The Goldsteins had taught her well, perhaps too well. She understood their systems intimately, knew exactly how to make them fail without triggering alarms. Through her monitors, she could track the progress of the evacuation. Groups of children were being quietly gathered from their assigned areas, led by Lightkeeper operatives disguised as Academy staff. The younger ones looked confused, but compliant, while the older students, those who understood what was happening, maintained careful expressions of normalcy. "Emily," Carter's voice came through the encrypted channel, "we're seeing increased activity in the security office. They might be noticing patterns in the system disruptions." "I've got it," she replied, fingers dancing across the keys. She'd learned to code by studying the Goldstein security systems, finding weaknesses and keeping the knowledge secret. Now she used those skills to create digital smoke screens, making the system disruptions appear like routine maintenance. A soft chime indicated an incoming message on the secure channel the Lightkeepers had established. "Warning, possible complication on B3. Guard rotation changed unexpectedly." Emily quickly pulled up the security feeds from level B3. A new group of guards had indeed arrived early, their presence threatening to intersect with the planned evacuation route. "Team Charlie, hold position," she transmitted. "Alternate. Route through maintenance corridor C required. Sending updated pathway now." She could see the team adjusting, redirecting their group of children through a narrow service passage. The youngest ones looked scared, but the older students helped, keep them quiet and orderly. "Emily," Sarah's voice was urgent, "your father's keeping Regina distracted, but we're picking up increased communications from her security team. They're starting to notice something's wrong." On her screens, Emily watched as another group of children reached the first checkpoint in the evacuation tunnel. The Lightkeepers were moving them in small clusters, trying to avoid drawing attention. But with each passing minute, the risk of discovery grew. "Time check," she requested, pulling up a new set of security protocols. "37 minutes since Operation Start," Carter responded. "We're ahead of schedule on the evacuation, but Regina's security team is getting suspicious," Emily finished. She'd spent years studying their patterns, learning to read the subtle signs of increased alertness. A movement on one of her monitors caught her attention. 2 security officers were approaching the encryption center, their pace casual but purposeful. Standard procedure was to check on high-security areas every hour. They were 20 minutes. "Hurley? 2 guards approaching my position," she reported calmly. "I need a diversion on level B5. Almost immediately, alarms began blaring from the opposite end of the level. Emily allowed herself a small smile. The lightkeepers were nothing if not efficient. The guards outside her door paused, then hurried toward the apparent disturbance. "Nice work," she murmured into her headset. "That was actually your father's idea," Sarah replied. "He insisted we have pre-planned distractions ready for every secure area." Emily felt a surge of pride mixed with longing. Even after 8 years, her father was still trying to protect her. She pushed the emotion down, focusing on the tasks at hand. The Goldsteins had taught her to compartmentalize, to suppress feelings. That might interfere with efficiency. Now she used those lessons against them. "Next group approaching checkpoint 2, Michael's voice reported. "Emily, we need those security cameras offline for the next corridor." Her fingers were already moving, implementing the necessary changes. On her screens, she could see the careful choreography of the evacuation. Lightkeeper teams moving children through blind spots, security systems coincidentally failing at crucial moments, guards being subtly redirected away from critical areas. A new alert flashed on her screen. Someone in the security office was attempting to manually override her systems. Emily's pulse quickened, but her hands remained steady as she countered their efforts. "Security office is getting more aggressive," she reported. "I can hold them off, but they'll know something's definitely wrong soon." "Understood," Colonel Hayes responded. "Accelerating evacuation timeline. Emily, prepare for Phase 4. Phase ED4, her own extraction." Emily glanced at the small bag hidden under her desk, packed with essentials weeks ago. According to the plan, she would remain at her post until the majority of children were safely out, using her access to protect their escape. Only then would she make her own way to the evacuation tunnel. "Emily," Sarah's voice was soft, "your father wanted me to tell you something. He said to remember the ballet recital, the one where you fell, but got back up and finished. Your routine. He said you were the strongest person he knew then, and you're even stronger now." The memory hit her like a physical force. She'd been 7, dancing the lead in her first major recital. She'd slipped during a difficult turn, but had refused to give up, completing the performance with fierce determination. Her father had taken her for ice cream afterward, telling her he was prouder of her resilience than he would have been of a perfect performance. Emily blinked back tears, forcing herself to focus on her monitors. Another group of children was approaching the evacuation tunnel. More security systems needed to be disabled, more cameras needed to be looped, more alarms needed to be diverted. "Tell him," she paused, controlling her voice. "Tell him I never stopped dancing. Even down here, even when they thought they'd broken me, I kept dancing." She could hear the smile in Sarah's voice. "He knows, Emily. He knows." In Regina Goldstein's office, the atmosphere grew increasingly tense as Alexander maintained his careful performance of business negotiation. Through his earpiece, he could hear the quiet updates from the teams below, each successful movement of children bringing them closer to their goal, each passing minute increasing the risk of discovery. "Your concerns about quantum computing seem specific," he said, watching Regina's face for reactions, "almost as if you've had experience with similar technology." Regina's smile remained perfectly composed, but Alexander caught the slight tightening around her eyes. "The financial world is changing, Mr. Sterling. Those who control data security control the future. Surely you understand why my family takes an interest." "Team Delta reports increased activity in main security hub," Colonel Hayes whispered in Alexander's ear. "They're starting to detect patterns in the system disruptions." James shifted his position slightly, moving closer to Regina's desk. His hand remained near his jacket, a subtle threat that Alexander pretended not to notice. The man he'd once trusted with everything now stood ready to protect the woman who had stolen his daughter. "It's interesting," Alexander mused, maintaining his casual tone, "how your family's banking interests seem to require such extensive security. The academy, the underground facilities, it seems rather elaborate for simple financial transactions." Regina leaned forward, her expression sharpening. "Nothing about our operations is simple, Mr. Sterling. We deal in trust, in discretion, in ensuring certain matters remain private. The children here, they're part of a legacy, a tradition of maintaining order in a chaotic world." "Alert!" Carter's voice was urgent in Alexander's ear. "Security team requesting access to level B5 encryption center. Emily's holding them off, but they're getting persistent." Alexander took a slow sip of his scotch, using the moment to steady his nerves. His daughter was 5 floors below, protecting the escape of others while putting herself at risk. Every fiber of his being wanted to rush to her, but he forced himself to remain seated, to maintain the facade. "Traditions can become chains," he said carefully, "systems of control that outlive their purpose. You've built an empire on secrets, Regina, but secrets have a way of coming to light." Regina's laugh was like cut crystal, sharp and brittle. "Is that a threat, Mr. Sterling?" "Coming from a man who built his own empire through hostile takeovers and aggressive acquisitions. How many lives have you disrupted in pursuit of profit?" "The difference," Alexander replied evenly, "is that I never stole children to maintain my control." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. James moved fully behind Regina's chair, his posture tense. But Regina merely smiled, reaching for a tablet on her desk. "Speaking of children," she said softly, turning the screen toward him, "would you like to see your daughter?" The image showed Emily at her workstation, surrounded by screens. Alexander's heart clenched at how grown-up she looked, how professionally she carried herself. But he could see the tension in her posture, the careful way she monitored her surroundings. "Team Charlie reports 60% of primary targets secured," Colonel Hayes updated. 40 minutes until estimated completion. "Emily has flourished here," Regina continued, her voice almost gentle. "Her skills with encryption, her understanding of financial systems, she's become an invaluable asset. Just like all our special students." "Assets," Alexander repeated, letting some of his anger show. "Is that how you see them? Tools to be used and controlled?" "We give them purpose," Regina countered, "structure, direction. Many of them had nothing before we took them in. No future, no prospects. We made them part of something greater." "Major alert," Carter's voice was sharp. In Alexander's ear, security override attempts detected on multiple levels. They're starting to realize something's wrong. Alexander watched Regina's face carefully, looking for any sign that she'd been notified of the situation developing below. But her expression remained calm, focused entirely on their conversation. "Something greater," Alexander echoed, "like your plan to use quantum dynamics research to upgrade your encryption, to hide your operations even more effectively." A flicker of surprise crossed Regina's features before she could suppress it. "You seem very well informed, Mr. Sterling. I wonder what other insights our little runaway has shared with you." "Emergency protocol initiated on level B4, Michael reported urgently. "Security teams mobilizing. Emily's trying to slow them down, but—" Alexander set his glass down deliberately, maintaining eye contact with Regina. "Sarah shared many interesting things about your operations, your methods, your plans, but the most interesting information came from your own records." Regina's smile hardened. "The notebook. A regrettable breach, but hardly damaging. Records can be altered, testimony discredited, especially when it comes from troubled children with questionable backgrounds." "Teams accelerating evacuation," Colonel Hayes announced. "Moving to contingency plan Delta. Emily, prepare for immediate extraction." Alexander felt the weight of the flash drive in his pocket, the insurance policy Isabella had given him. Everything was balanced on a knife's edge now. Below them, The carefully planned evacuation was shifting into emergency protocols. His daughter was at risk, and yet he had to maintain this performance, keep Regina's attention focused on him. "What if," he said carefully, "I told you I have more than just the notebook? What if there was evidence that couldn't be discredited or explained away?" Regina's eyes narrowed slightly. "Are you attempting to blackmail me, Mr. Sterling? In my own office?" "Alert," Carter's voice was urgent. "Security teams converging on level B5. Emily's position is compromised. Immediate extraction required." The game was reaching its critical point. Alexander could feel the tension radiating from James, sense Regina's calculating mind working through possibilities. And 5 floors below, his daughter was in danger. The next few minutes would determine everything. Everything happened at once. In the encryption center, Emily's screens erupted with alerts as security systems across multiple levels initiated. Emergency protocols. The careful balance she'd maintained for the past hour shattered as override commands flooded the network. "Security teams breaching level B5, she reported calmly, her fingers flying across multiple keyboards. "Implementing lockdown procedures to slow their advance." "Get out of there now," Sarah's voice was urgent in her ear. "Emily, they're coming straight for you. The evacuation tunnel is still clear. You have a 4-minute window." But Emily remained focused on her screens, watching the security team's movements. "Negative. 3rd group of children still in transit. They'll be exposed if I abandon my post." Through her monitors, she could see the younger kids being hurried through maintenance corridors, guided by Lightkeeper operatives disguised as staff. They were so close to freedom, she couldn't fail them now. "Emily," Colonel Hayes' voice cut through the chatter, "your father ordered us to prioritize your safety. There's a Lightkeeper team 90 seconds from your position." The sound of boots in the corridor outside made Emily's decision for her. She initiated her final protocol, a cascade of system failures designed to create maximum confusion. Alarms blared throughout the facility as sprinklers activated on random floors. Emergency lights flickered and security doors cycled between locked and unlocked states. She grabbed her pre-packed bag just as the door to the encryption center burst open. 2 security officers rushed in, but Emily was already moving. Years of watching, learning, and planning had taught her every detail of the facility's layout. She slipped through a hidden maintenance access panel behind her workstation, closing it silently behind her. "Target lost," she heard one guard report. Through her monitoring equipment, "Encryption center is empty. Systems are going haywire across all levels." Emily moved swiftly through the narrow maintenance passage, counting turns in her head. The service corridors were a maze designed to confuse intruders, but she'd mapped them meticulously during her years of captivity. "Emily, status report," Sarah demanded through her earpiece. "Moving to extraction point Beta," Emily whispered, "but I need to make one stop first." "Negative," Colonel Hayes cut in. "Proceed directly to the evacuation tunnel. That's an order." Emily ignored the command, taking a sharp left at a junction. "There's something in Regina's private vault, evidence she keeps separate from everything else. The Lightkeepers need it." She could hear the argument brewing in her earpiece, but focused on navigating the passages. 8 years of watching Regina Goldstein had taught her that the woman always kept her most crucial documents close. The vault on level B6 contained secrets even the notebook didn't reveal. "Security teams converging on level B6, Carter reported urgently. "Emily, you're running out of time." The vault corridor was eerily quiet when Emily emerged from the maintenance shaft. Emergency lights cast strange shadows as she approached the massive steel door. Years of observation had given her the codes, but she'd never dared use them, until now. Her fingers moved swiftly over the keypad as alarms continued to blare throughout the facility. The door opened with a soft hiss, revealing a small room lined with filing cabinets and a sophisticated computer system. 2 minutes until security teams reach your position, Michael warned. Emily moved quickly, accessing the computer with credentials she'd memorized long ago. Files began transferring to her secured drive as she pulled open specific drawers, retrieving documents she'd identified during her careful surveillance. "Emily," Sarah's voice was pleading now, "the last group of children is clear. The Lightkeepers, are falling back to extraction points. You need to move. The file transfer completed just as boots echoed in the corridor outside. Emily grabbed the documents and her drive, slipping back into the maintenance passage seconds before security teams rounded the corner. Target spotted on B6, a voice crackled through her monitoring equipment. All teams converge on Vault Sector. Emily moved swiftly through the service corridors, changing levels through emergency stairs designed for maintenance workers. The evacuation tunnel was 3 minutes away if she took the most direct route, but that path would be watched now. Emily, listen to me. Sarah's voice was intense. Your father's engaged Regina directly. He's buying us time, but it won't last. The tunnel entrance on B4 is still clear, but you have to move now. Clutching her precious cargo, Emily made a decision. There was a ventilation shaft that connected B6 to B4, risky but unlikely to be guarded. She'd discovered it years ago while mapping potential escape routes. Taking alternate path to extraction point, she reported, locating the hidden access panel. 90 seconds to tunnel entrance. The shaft was narrow and dusty, requiring her to move carefully to avoid making noise. Above and below she could hear security teams searching, their radios crackling with urgent communications. Alert! Carter's voice was sharp. Regina's ordered a complete lockdown, all security doors sealing in 60 seconds. Emily reached the B4 access panel just as emergency sirens began wailing, the signal for facility-wide lockdown. She could hear the massive security doors beginning to close throughout the level. The evacuation tunnel entrance was 30 meters away. Security teams were closing in from multiple directions, and the doors were slowly but inexorably sliding shut. Emily Sterling, who had spent 8 years surviving in this underground prison, took a deep breath and prepared to run. In Regina's office, the carefully maintained facade of civilized negotiation shattered as alarms began blaring throughout the building. Regina's composed expression flickered as her tablet erupted with urgent notifications. "What have you done?" she demanded, all pretense of cordiality vanishing. Alexander rose slowly, noting how James moved to block the door. "I didn't do anything, Regina. Your empire is crumbling under its own weight." "Sir," a voice crackled through Regina's desk speaker, "we have multiple security breaches. The children, they're gone, most of them. And the vault on B6 has been compromised." Regina's face contorted with rage as she stabbed at her tablet screen. "Initiate complete lockdown. Seal all exits. No one leaves this facility." "Emily's approaching the tunnel entrance," Colonel Hayes reported in Alexander's ear. "Security doors are closing. She needs more time." Alexander stepped toward Regina's desk, drawing her attention. "Did you really think you could maintain control forever? That you could keep stealing children, destroying families, and no one would ever stop you?" "You understand nothing," Regina snarled, her sophisticated veneer cracking. "We protected those children, gave them purpose, structure, power. What would they have had otherwise?" "They would have had freedom," Alexander countered, "the chance to choose their own paths. Instead, you turned them into tools for your criminal empire." James moved closer, his hand now openly reaching for his weapon. But Alexander kept his focus on Regina, knowing his daughter's safety depended on maintaining this confrontation. "Target locked out of evacuation tunnel," a voice reported through Regina's speaker. "Security teams converging on level B4. "Emily," Sarah's voice was tense in Alexander's ear. "Emily, report status." Static was the only response. Regina's smile turned predatory as she watched Alexander's expression. "Ah, so that's it. Your precious Emily made her move, didn't she? 8 years I spent molding her, teaching her, making her strong. And this is how she repays me?" "You didn't make her strong." Alexander's voice was steel. "She already was strong, just like all the children you tried to break. They survived you, Regina. They learned from you. And now they're using everything you taught them to bring you down." Regina laughed, the sound harsh in the alarm-filled air. "Bring me down, Mr. Sterling. I've spent decades building this organization. I have contingency plans for every possible scenario, including this one." She pressed a button on her desk, and hidden panels in the office walls slid open to reveal armed security teams. "Remember when I mentioned having evidence that couldn't be discredited?" Alexander asked calmly, even as weapons trained on him. It's already being uploaded to every major news organization, law enforcement agency, and financial regulator in the world. Regina's finger froze above another button on her desk. You're bluffing. Am I? Alexander smiled. Check your secure servers, Regina. While you've been focused on me, others have been very busy. Sir? Carter's voice was triumphant in his Coach. Emily made it. She's in the tunnel with the documents from the vault. Teams are falling back to extraction points. Alexander maintained his steady gaze on Regina as her fingers flew across her tablet, checking systems and servers. He watched the color drain from her face as she realized the extent of the breach. Regina. James stepped forward, his expression worried. Regina, we need to initiate Protocol Omega. Now. But Regina seemed frozen, staring at her tablet in horror. The offshore accounts, the shell companies, everything. 8 years, Alexander said quietly. 8 years I spent building my company, making deals, expanding my influence. Do you know why? Regina looked up, her eyes wild. To find Emily, to get revenge. No, Alexander corrected. To be ready for this moment. To have the resources, the connections, and the power to ensure that when we finally moved against you, nothing would be left of your empire. All teams clear of the facility, Colonel Hayes reported. Primary and secondary objectives achieved, evidence secured. Regina stabbed frantically at her desk controls. Security, lock down everything, seal all exits, initiate data purge. Protocols? I'm afraid those systems aren't responding, Alexander said calmly. Your encryption expert seems to have made some rather dramatic changes to your security protocols. The sound of helicopters approaching filled the air as Regina's security teams exchanged uncertain glances. Through the office windows, Alexander could see law enforcement vehicles approaching the academy gates. It's over, Regina, he said softly. The children are free. Your records are exposed. The carefully built walls of your world are crashing down. Regina straightened, her composure returning like armor. You have no idea what you've done. The people I protect, the interests I serve, they won't allow this. Those people are running for cover as we speak, Alexander replied. Your encrypted files made for interesting reading, especially the ones Emily retrieved from your private vault just minutes ago. James raised his weapon, but the security teams were already lowering theirs, reading the situation with professional clarity. Regina Goldstein, a new voice boomed through a megaphone outside. This is the FBI. The facility is surrounded. Come out with your hands up. Alexander met Regina's gaze one final time. You stole my daughter, thinking you could control me through her. Instead, you taught her everything she needed to destroy you. Ironic, isn't it? As law enforcement officers burst into the office, Alexander thought of Emily, safe in the evacuation tunnel with the final pieces of evidence. Of Sarah, who had risked everything to set this in motion. Of the Lightkeepers, whose years of patient planning had finally paid off. Regina Goldstein's empire hadn't fallen to an outside attack. It had been dismantled from within, by the very children she had tried to mold into tools of control. And somewhere in the chaos, a father and daughter were about to reunite after 8 long years apart. The abandoned quarry buzzed with controlled chaos as Lightkeeper teams emerged from the evacuation tunnel. Medical personnel checked the rescued children, while intelligence officers secured documents and digital evidence. The morning sun cast long shadows across the scene, highlighting the exhaustion and relief on every face. Alexander stood at the tunnel entrance, his heart pounding. The FBI had escorted him from the academy after Regina's arrest, rushing him to the extraction point. Now he waited, scanning each group of evacuees, looking for the daughter he hadn't seen in 8 years. Emily's group is 2 minutes out, Sarah reported, appearing at his side. Her small face was streaked with dust, but glowing with triumph. She did it, Mr. Sterling. She got everything from Regina's vault. Alexander barely heard her, focused entirely on the tunnel entrance. After 8 years of searching, of building his resources, of never giving up hope, these final minutes felt like an eternity. Colonel Hayes approached, her tactical gear dusty from the operation. All children accounted for. 67 total, ranging from 6 to 17 years old. Medical teams are evaluating everyone, but no serious injuries reported. The evidence? Alexander asked, forcing himself to focus. Secure. Emily's data drive contains everything we needed and more. The documents from Regina's vault. Hayes shook her head in amazement. It's going to bring down more than just the Goldsteins. Half the financial world will be in chaos by tomorrow. Movement at the tunnel entrance drew Alexander's attention. A group of teenagers emerged, led by a lightkeeper operative. And there, in the middle of the group, Emily. She looked so different from the little girl in his memories. Taller, of course, but it was more than that. She carried herself with a grave dignity that no 15-year-old should possess. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical braid, and her eyes were older than her years. She scanned the crowd, her expression carefully controlled. Then she saw him. For a moment, neither of them moved. 8 years of separation, of grief and longing and desperate hope, crystallized in that single frozen instant. Then Emily broke into a run. Alexander caught her as she crashed into him, lifting her off her feet like she was still his little girl. She clung to him fiercely, her composure shattering as 8 years of carefully maintained control gave way to raw emotion. "I knew you'd come," she whispered against his shoulder. "They said you'd given up, that you'd moved on. But I knew they were lying." Alexander held her tighter, his own tears falling freely. "I never stopped looking for you, never stopped hoping." They stayed like that for a long moment, neither willing to let go. Around them, the operation continued, medical teams treating children, intelligence officers processing evidence, FBI agents coordinating with local law enforcement. But for father and daughter, the world had narrowed to this single point of connection. Finally, Emily pulled back slightly, wiping her eyes. "I got them," she said, her voice stronger. Everything Regina tried to hide, all the evidence she kept, separate from the main servers, account numbers, contact lists, blackmail material, it's all there. Alexander brushed a strand of hair from her face, marveling at how she could look so different yet so familiar. "You were incredible. The way you handled the security systems, protected the other children." "I had to," Emily said simply. "I couldn't let them keep hurting people. Regina thought she was making us stronger, teaching us to be ruthless and calculating. But she never understood. Real strength comes from protecting others, not controlling them." Sarah approached, cautiously, not wanting to intrude but carrying a tablet with urgent information. "Emily, the files you recovered, they're already having an impact. Financial markets are responding to the first wave of revelations." Emily nodded, her expression turning serious. Regina's network was bigger than anyone realized. The evidence from her vault proves connections to major financial institutions, government officials, even international organizations. It's going to take months to unravel everything. Alexander kept one arm around his daughter as he studied the data, scrolling across Sarah's tablet. Stock prices were plummeting as the first hints of scandal reached the markets. By tomorrow, the financial world would be in upheaval as the full scope of the Goldsteins' corruption came to light. "What about the other children?" Emily asked, watching as medical teams continued their evaluations. "Some of them have been there even longer than I was. They don't have families to go back to." "The Lightkeepers have safe houses prepared," Sarah explained. "Counselors, support services, everything they need to adjust to normal life. And," she smiled slightly, "some of them want to help. They've learned skills that could be valuable in preventing other organizations from doing what the Goldsteins did." Emily's grip on her father's arm tightened. "I want to help too. What I learned there, the encryption systems, the financial tracking methods, I can use it to protect people instead of manipulating them." Alexander looked down at his daughter, seeing not just the little girl he'd lost, but the remarkable young woman she'd become. Despite everything the Goldsteins had done to control her, they'd failed to break her spirit or corrupt her heart. "First," he said gently, "you need time to heal, to be a teenager, to do normal things. The rest can wait." Emily shook her head. "Dad, I haven't been normal since they took me, but maybe that's okay. Maybe what happened to me, what I learned." Maybe it can serve a greater purpose. A commotion near the tunnel entrance drew their attention. The last group of Lightkeeper operatives was emerging, carrying boxes of documents and hard drives, the final pieces of evidence that would dismantle Regina Goldstein's empire. "Mr. Sterling," Colonel Hayes called out, "we need to move everyone to the secure location. The media's getting wind of the operation." Alexander nodded, keeping his arm around Emily as they walked toward the waiting vehicles. After 8 years of separation, he wasn't letting her out of his sight. "Dad?" Emily's voice was quieter now, more vulnerable. Can we get ice cream? Like we used to after my ballet recitals." Alexander's heart clenched at the memory. His confident little dancer, celebrating her performances with double scoop, sundaes and endless stories about her adventures on stage. "Of course," he managed, his voice rough with emotion. "Any flavor you want?" Emily smiled, and for a moment she looked exactly like the 8-year-old in his memories. "I never forgot," she said softly. "Even down there, even when things were darkest. I never forgot what it felt like to be your daughter." As they reached the vehicles, the sun finally broke fully through the morning clouds, illuminating the scene with golden light. Behind them, Regina Goldstein's underground empire lay exposed and broken. Ahead lay challenges, healing, and the slow process of rebuilding shattered lives. But in this moment, a father and daughter walked together in the sunlight, united after 8 years of darkness. And that perhaps was the greatest victory of all. The Lightkeeper's safe house in Connecticut had transformed into a command center for managing the aftermath of the operation. 3 days after the raid on Riverside Academy, Alexander sat in the main operations room, watching multiple news channels cover the unfolding scandal. Financial markets worldwide were reeling as the extent of the Goldsteins' corruption came to light. "Another banking CEO resigned this morning," Diana reported, setting a fresh cup of coffee in front of him. "The evidence from Regina's vault is causing an earthquake in the financial sector." "Good," Alexander said firmly. "Let them feel the consequences of their choices." Through the window, he could see Emily in the garden, working with Sarah and some of the younger children who had been rescued. She moved with a patient grace, helping them adjust to their newfound freedom while processing her own emotions. "She's remarkable," Diana observed, following his gaze. "Most people would be overwhelmed, but she's channeling her experience into helping others." "She gets that from her mother," Alexander said softly. "Catherine always knew how to turn adversity into strength." The door opened, and Marcus entered, carrying a stack of files. "The FBI's investigation is expanding. They're following money trails across 3 continents. Regina's network went deeper than anyone imagined." "What about James?" Alexander asked, thinking of his former friend. "In custody, along with most of Regina's inner circle. He's apparently offering to cooperate in exchange for leniency." Marcus spread several documents across the table. "But that's not our biggest concern right now." Alexander leaned forward, studying the papers. "The other families." "Exactly." Diana took a seat across from him. "The Goldsteins weren't the only ones operating these kinds of schemes. There are others, watching what's happening and preparing to go dark." "Let them run," Emily's voice came from the doorway. She entered the room with quiet confidence, Sarah at her side. "They'll leave traces, they always do." Alexander felt a surge of pride mixed with concern. His daughter spoke from hard-won experience, but part of him still wanted to protect her from this darkness. Emily seemed to read his thoughts. "Dad, I know you want me to have a normal life, but what happened to me? It gave me knowledge and skills that can help prevent this from happening to other children." "The quantum computing research," Sarah added eagerly. "Sterling Tech's breakthrough could revolutionize how we track these organizations, especially with Emily's understanding of their methods." Alexander studied his daughter's face, seeing the same determination that had helped her survive 8 years underground. "You're sure about this? You deserve time to heal, to be young." Emily's smile was gentle but firm. "I'm not the same girl they took 8 years ago. I can't pretend to be. But I can use what I've learned to make a difference." Colonel Hayes entered carrying a secure tablet. "Speaking of making a difference, we've identified 3 more facilities similar to Riverside Academy." Different families, same basic operation. They'll be revising their security protocols, Emily mused, scanning the data, changing passwords, updating encryption, but they'll make mistakes. They always do when they're scared. We've already had inquiries from several intelligence agencies, Diana added. They want to work with us, combine our knowledge with their resources. Alexander watched as Emily moved to one of the computer stations, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she analyzed security patterns. She worked with focused precision, but there was no coldness in her methods. Unlike Regina, who saw people as tools to be used, Emily never forgot the human cost behind the data. The Lightkeepers are evolving, Marcus said quietly. What started as a rescue operation is becoming something more, a network dedicated to preventing these organizations from exploiting children. Sarah nodded enthusiastically. We already have former students volunteering to help. They want to use their skills to protect others instead of helping criminal enterprises. But they'll need guidance, Diana pointed out. Support, resources. Alexander understood what they were suggesting. His company, his influence, his resources, they could help transform the Lightkeepers from a rescue operation into a force for lasting change. Emily? He asked, leaving the decision to her. She turned from the computer, her expression thoughtful. Regina thought she was creating perfect tools, children trained to serve her empire's needs. Instead, she created her own downfall. We understand these systems from the inside. We know how to fight them. Alexander nodded, his decision made. Then let's give you the resources you need. Sterling Tech's quantum computing research, combined with your knowledge, we can build something that actually protects children instead of exploiting them. A new kind of organization, Diana mused, one that uses technology and intelligence to prevent trafficking and exploitation. With proper oversight, Colonel Hayes added, transparency, accountability, everything the Goldsteins opposed. Emily's eyes lit up with purpose. We can create detection systems, monitor suspicious financial patterns, identify potential trafficking operations before they can take root. It won't be easy, Marcus cautioned. These organizations have deep roots, powerful connections. Nothing worthwhile is easy, Emily replied, sounding so much like her mother that Alexander's heart ached. But we have something they don't, a network of survivors who understand their methods and want to make a difference. Sarah grinned, plus really cool quantum computers. The room filled with gentle laughter, a sound that would have been impossible just days ago. Outside, the sun was setting over the Connecticut countryside, painting the sky in shades of hope. Alexander watched his daughter return to her work, her movements sure and purposeful. The Goldsteins had tried to turn her into a tool for their empire. Instead, they had helped forge a protector, someone determined to prevent others from suffering. As she had, life would never return to what it was before that terrible day 8 years ago, but perhaps it could become something new, something that turned pain into purpose, survival into strength, and darkness into dawn. 1 month after the fall of Riverside Academy, Sterling Tech's headquarters had undergone a remarkable transformation. The once sterile executive floor now buzzed with energy as former Lightkeeper operatives worked alongside corporate security experts and technology specialists. Alexander had devoted an entire wing to what the media was calling the Guardian Initiative. Emily stood at the window of her father's office, now converted into a joint operations center. Multiple screens displayed global financial data, security feeds, and pattern recognition algorithms. But unlike the underground control center at Riverside, this room was filled with natural light and a sense of purpose. The quantum computing integration is exceeding expectations, Carter reported, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses as he reviewed the latest data. Emily's insights into their encryption methods have helped us develop detection systems we never thought possible. So they're already adapting, Emily noted, pointing to patterns in the financial data. The other families are changing their methods, trying to hide their operations more effectively. But they can't hide everything, Sarah added confidently. She had grown in the past month, carrying herself with new assurance. Their basic patterns remain the same. They still need to move money, maintain facilities, control information. Alexander watched the interaction with pride. The survivors of Riverside Academy had transformed their trauma into expertise, their pain into determination. What Regina had intended as tools of control had become instruments of justice. Diana entered the room, accompanied by representatives from international law enforcement agencies. "The cooperation agreements are finalized," she announced. "We'll have access to global financial monitoring systems, and they'll have access to our detection algorithms." "With conditions," Alexander added firmly. "Everything stays transparent, every operation subject to oversight. We don't become what we're fighting against." Emily nodded approvingly. She had been insistent on this point. Their new organization would operate in the light, its methods open to scrutiny. No more shadows, no more hidden agendas. "The rehabilitation program is showing promising results," Isabella reported, joining the group. She had taken charge of supporting the rescued children, ensuring they received the care and guidance needed to rebuild their lives. "Many of the older students are expressing interest in joining our training program." "Speaking of training," Colonel Hayes interjected, "the first class of analysts starts next week. 20 former Riverside students, all volunteering to help identify and prevent trafficking operations." Emily turned from the window, her expression serious. "They understand what to look for because they lived it. But this time, they're choosing to use their knowledge. That makes all the difference." Sarah pulled up a new display, showing a network of connections spanning the globe. "We've already identified 3 more operations similar to Riverside. Different families, same basic structure, using children to manage their financial networks while keeping them as hostages. But now, we have something they don't," Carter added with satisfaction. "Quantum computing combined with insider knowledge. They can't move money without leaving traces we can detect." Alexander moved to Emily's side, still marveling at how his daughter had grown from a victim into a leader. "The Sterling Lightkeeper Foundation launches next week," he said softly. "A public face for our private operations, legitimate support for trafficking survivors while our teams work behind the scenes." Emily smiled. "Regina thought she was teaching us to serve her empire. Instead, she taught us exactly how to bring down operations like hers." She paused, considering. "Have you heard anything about her?" "She's cooperating with authorities," Diana replied. "Not out of remorse, but survival instinct. Her information is helping us unravel decades of financial crimes." "And James?" Alexander asked, thinking of his former friend. "Talking to anyone who'll listen," Colonel Hayes said grimly. "His testimony is particularly damaging to the other families. He knows all their methods, their contacts, their weaknesses." Sarah pulled up another display, this one showing news, coverage of their organization. The media had latched onto the story of trafficking survivors, turning their experiences into a force for good. Headlines praised the Guardian Initiative's combination of cutting-edge technology and human intelligence. "We're making a difference," Emily said quietly, watching as another financial network collapsed under scrutiny. "Every child we save, every operation we expose, it matters." Alexander studied the room, taking in the scene. Former victims working confidently at advanced computer systems. Lightkeeper operatives coordinating with law enforcement. His daughter standing tall and purposeful, leading initiatives she had designed herself. "Regina thought power came from controlling people," Emily continued, her voice thoughtful. "She never understood that real strength comes from choosing to help others despite what was done to you." As if to emphasize her point, alerts began flashing across the screens. Another suspicious pattern had been detected, another potential trafficking operation identified. The team moved into action with practiced efficiency, their movements coordinated and purposeful. Emily took her place at the main console, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she analyzed the data. Sarah worked beside her, their shared experiences creating an unspoken understanding. Around them, the combined forces of Sterling Tech and the Lightkeepers began the process of bringing another shadow organization into the light. Alexander watched with pride as his daughter commanded the operation. She had emerged from 8 years of darkness, not just surviving, but determined to light the way for others. The Goldsteins' attempt to create perfect tools had instead created perfect adversaries, survivors who understood the enemy's methods and had the moral strength to fight back. As the sun set over Manhattan, its light reflected off the building's windows. There were no shadows in the Guardian Initiative's operations center, only clarity, purpose, and the quiet satisfaction of good people working to make the world a little bit safer for those who couldn't protect themselves. The autumn breeze carried the scent of falling leaves as Emily sat on the balcony of her new home, a cup of tea warming her hands. From this height, she could see the Sterling Tech building where she spent her days working with the Guardian Initiative. But this space, this moment, was for healing. "Your mother loved moments like this," Alexander said, joining her with his own cup. "Quiet mornings just watching the city wake up." Emily smiled, remembering the faint impressions of weekend breakfasts with both her parents before everything changed. "Tell me about her again. Sometimes I worry I'm forgetting." Alexander settled into the chair beside her. "Catherine was the strongest person I've ever known, until you. She had this way of seeing through problems to find solutions no one else considered, just like you do." The door slid open as Sarah emerged, carrying a plate of pastries. She had become part of their family in the weeks since Riverside's fall, her presence helping both Emily and Alexander bridge the years they'd lost. "The therapist says I'm making progress," Sarah announced, settling cross-legged on a cushion. "She thinks helping with the Guardian Initiative is good for my recovery. Turning bad memories into positive action or something like that." Emily reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "We all are. Every time we stop another operation, save another child, it helps heal something inside us." Alexander watched, the interaction with quiet gratitude. His daughter had not only returned to him, but had brought with her a deeper understanding of what mattered in life. The empire he'd built now served a greater purpose than mere profit. "The foundations first. Public event is tomorrow," he reminded them. "Are you sure you're ready for that?" Emily nodded firmly. "The world needs to understand what happened at Riverside, not just the crimes, but the survival, the strength that can come from overcoming trauma. Plus," Sarah added with a grin, "we get to announce the scholarship program. Full rides to any university for trafficking survivors who want to study cybersecurity or financial forensics." The sound of a phone buzzing interrupted the peaceful moment. Emily checked the message, her expression turning serious. "Another pattern detected in Southeast Asia, similar to Riverside's setup." "Work can wait," Alexander said gently. "You don't have to carry everything on your shoulders." Emily's smile was both sad and determined. "Dad, helping others is how I carry it. Every child we save, every operation we expose. It makes what happened to me mean something." Sarah nodded in understanding. "It's like what Dr. Chen says in therapy. We can't change what happened to us, but we can change what happens to others because of what we learned." Alexander studied his daughter's face, seeing both the shadows of her past and the light of her purpose. She had transformed her prison's lessons into tools for liberation, her captors' training into weapons against their own kind. "I got a letter from one of the younger kids we rescued," Sarah mentioned, reaching for a pastry. "She's starting regular school next week. Says she's nervous but excited. Wants to join the Guardian Initiative when she's older." "They all do," Emily mused. "Regina never understood. The more she tried to control us, the more she taught us to resist control. Every skill she forced us to learn becomes another way to fight back." A gentle chime sounded from Emily's phone, a reminder of her therapy appointment. Another part of healing, of processing 8 years of trauma while building something new from the ashes of the past. "I'll drive you," Alexander offered, standing. The simple act of being present for these moments meant everything to him. As they prepared to leave, Emily paused at the balcony door, looking out over the city. The morning sun caught her face, highlighting how much she'd grown while revealing glimpses of the little girl she'd been. "Sometimes," she said quietly, "I dream about the underground levels at Riverside. But they're different now. Instead of feeling trapped, I'm leading others to freedom, showing them the way out." Sarah touched her arm gently. "That's exactly what you're doing with the Guardian Initiative, leading others to freedom." Alexander watched his daughter square her shoulders, ready to face another day of turning pain into purpose. She carried herself with a grace that had nothing to do with the ballet lessons of her childhood, and everything to do with the strength she'd found in darkness. The city stretched out before them, its gleaming towers catching the morning light. Somewhere in those buildings, other children waited to be saved, other operations waited to be exposed, other shadows waited to be brought into the light. But here, in this moment, a father and daughter stood together in the sunlight, accompanied by a friend who had become family. They had emerged from darkness, carrying not just scars but wisdom, not just survival skills but the determination to ensure others wouldn't need them. As they left the apartment, Emily paused one last time, looking back at the peaceful scene they'd created. Teacups on the table, pastries half-eaten, morning sun warming the space. A glimpse of normal life, hard-won and precious. "Ready?" Alexander asked softly. Emily nodded, her expression serene. Ready to make another day count. 1 year after the fall of Riverside Academy, the Sterling Lightkeeper Foundation's main auditorium was filled to capacity. Survivors, law enforcement officials, and supporters gathered for the anniversary commemoration. But this wasn't a ceremony of remembrance. It was a celebration of transformation. Emily stood at the podium, her presence commanding yet gentle. The past year had changed her, softening the sharp edges of survival into something stronger. Behind her, screens displayed the Foundation's achievements. Hundreds of children rescued, dozens of trafficking operations dismantled, millions in criminal assets seized and redirected to rehabilitation programs. "A year ago," she began, her voice clear and steady, "I stood in an underground room using skills I was forced to learn to help others escape. Today I stand here by choice, using those same skills to prevent others from experiencing what we did." In the front row, Alexander watched his daughter with pride. Beside him sat Sarah, now the Foundation's youth outreach coordinator, and members of the original Lightkeeper Council. They had evolved from a secret rescue organization into a global force for change, combining technology, intelligence, and the unshakable determination of survivors. The Goldsteins thought they were creating perfect tools, Emily continued, gesturing to the former Riverside students scattered throughout the audience. They taught us encryption, financial analysis, pattern recognition. They thought these skills would serve their empire. Instead, we've used them to build something they never imagined, a network of protection, healing, and hope. The screens behind her shifted to show the Guardian Initiative's latest breakthrough, a quantum computing system that could identify trafficking patterns in global financial networks. Emily's understanding of the Goldsteins' methods had been crucial in its development. "But our greatest strength isn't in our technology or our tactics," she said, her gaze sweeping the room. "It's in our choice to help others, despite what was done to us, to turn survival into service, pain into purpose." Sarah stood and joined her at the podium, their presence together symbolizing the bridge between past and future. "Today, we're announcing the expansion of our scholarship program," Sarah announced. "Every survivor who wants to study cybersecurity, financial forensics, or counseling will have that opportunity. The skills that were once used to control us will become tools of liberation." Alexander watched as the audience responded with emotional applause. Many of them were parents of rescued children, seeing in Emily and Sarah the hope of what their own kids could become. Others were law enforcement officials who had witnessed the Foundation's effectiveness firsthand. "A year ago," Emily resumed, her voice softening, "someone told me I needed time to heal, to be normal again." She smiled at her father. "But I've learned that healing doesn't mean forgetting or going back. It means moving forward with purpose, using everything we've learned to light the way for others." The screens displayed a new image: the Foundation's international network of support centers, each offering a combination of therapy, education, and empowerment programs. Places where survivors could find not just healing, but purpose. The Guardian Initiative isn't just about stopping criminal operations," she explained. "It's about transforming the very things that were used to control us. Every encrypted network we uncover, every financial trail we expose, every child we help rescue, It's another piece of darkness turned to light. Sarah stepped forward, again. We're not just survivors anymore. We're guardians, protecting others from experiencing what we did, and our network grows stronger every day. As if to emphasize her point, the screens showed live feeds from Guardian Initiative operations centers around the world. Former Riverside students worked alongside cybersecurity experts, their combined knowledge creating a shield against trafficking operations. To those still trapped in darkness, Emily said, her voice carrying emotion but not weakness, we want you to know that hope exists. There are people who understand, who have walked the same paths, who will never stop working to find you. She paused, looking out over the audience. And to those who think they can continue the Goldsteins' work, who believe they can control and exploit children for their empires, we are watching. We understand your methods because we lived them. And we will not rest until every operation is exposed, every child is free, and every shadow is brought into the light. The applause was thunderous, but Emily wasn't finished. She turned slightly, addressing the cameras that were streaming the event globally. If you're watching this, whether you're a survivor, a supporter, or someone who wants to help, know that you're not alone. The Sterling Lightkeeper Foundation isn't just an organization. It's a movement, a promise that what happened at Riverside will never happen again. Sarah joined in, her voice strong. Join us. Support our mission. Help us protect those who can't protect themselves. Together, we can turn the darkest experiences into the brightest hope for change. As the ceremony concluded, Emily found herself surrounded by well-wishers and supporters, but her eyes sought out her father, who enveloped her in a tight embrace. Your mother would be so proud, he whispered. Emily held him close, feeling the full circle of their journey. From the frightened father searching for his stolen daughter to the leader of an organization dedicated to preventing other families from experiencing such pain. Outside, the sun was setting over the city, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple. But inside the Foundation's headquarters, there were no shadows, only the bright light of purpose, healing, and hope, illuminating a path forward for all those who needed to find their way home.